Line 657. A cloud of blinding dust is raised around, labors beneath their feet the trembling ground. Now Turnus, posted on a hill, from far beheld the progress of the moving war. With him the Latins viewed the covered plains, and the chill blood ran backward in their veins. Juturna saw the advancing troops appear, and heard the hostile sound, and fled for fear. Aeneas leads, and draws a sweeping train, closed in their ranks, and pouring on the plain. As when a whirlwind rushing to the shore from the mid-ocean drives the waves before, the painful hind with heavy heart foresees the flatted fields and slaughter of the trees. With like impetuous rage the prince appears before his doubled front, nor less destruction bears. And now both armies shock in open field. Osiris is by strong Thymbrius killed. Arcadius, Ufens, Epilon are slain, all famed in arms and of the Latian train, by Gaius, Menesthius, and Acades' hand. The fatal augur falls, by whose command the truce was broken, and whose lance, imbrued with Trojan blood, the unhappy fight renewed. Loud shouts and clamours rend the liquid sky, and o'er the field the frighted Latins fly. The prince disdains the dastards to pursue, nor moves to meet in arms the fighting few. Turnus alone amid the dusky plain he seeks, and to the combat calls in vain. Juturna heard, and seized with mortal fear, forced from the beam her brother's charioteer, assumes his shape, his armour, and his mien, and, like Metiscus, in his seat is seen. As the black swallow near the palace plies, o'er empty courts and under arches flies, now hawks aloft, now skims along the flood, to furnish her loquacious nest with food, so drives the rapid goddess o'er the plains. The smoking horses run with loosened reins. She steers a various course among the foes, now here, now there, her conquering brother shows. Now with a straight, now with a wheeling flight, she turns and bends, but shuns the single fight. Aeneas, fired with fury, breaks the crowd, and seeks his foe, and calls by name aloud. He runs within a narrow ring, and tries to stop the chariot, but the chariot flies. If he but gain a glimpse, Juturna fears, and far away the Daunian hero bears. What should he do? Nor arts nor arms avail, and various cares in vain his mind assail. The great Messapus, thundering through the field, in his left hand 2 pointed javelins held, encountered on the prince. One dart he drew, and with unerring aim and utmost vigour threw. Aeneas saw it come, and stooping low beneath his buckler, shunned the threatening blow. The weapon hissed above his head, and tore the waving plume which on his helm he wore. Forced by this hostile act, and fired with spite, that flying Turnus still declined the fight. The prince, whose piety had long repelled his inborn ardour, now invades the field, invokes the powers of violated peace, their rights and injured altars to redress. Then to his rage abandoning the rein, with blood and slaughtered bodies fills the plain. What god can tell, what numbers can display, the various labours of that fatal day? What chiefs and champions fell on either side, in combat slain, or by what deaths they died? Whom Turnus, whom the Trojan hero killed, who shared the fame and fortune of the field? Jove, couldst thou view and not avert thy sight, 2 jarring nations joined in cruel fight, whom leagues of lasting love so shortly shall unite. Aeneas first Rutulian Sucro found, whose valour made the Trojans quit their ground. Betwixt his ribs the javelin drove so just, it reached his heart, nor needs a second thrust. Now Turnus at 2 blows 2 brethren slew. First from his horse fierce Amycus he threw, then leaping on the ground, on foot assailed Diorus, and in equal fight prevailed. Their lifeless trunks he leaves upon the place, their heads distilling gore his chariot grace. 3 cold on earth the Trojan hero threw, whom without respite in one charge he slew. Cethegus, Tanais, Tagus fell oppressed, and sad Onethes added to the rest of Theban blood, whom Peridia bore. Turnus 2 brothers from the Lycian shore, and from Apollo's fane to battle sent. o'erthrew, nor Phoebus could their fate prevent. Peaceful Menoetus after these he killed, who long had shunned the dangers of the field. On Lerna's lake a silent life he led, and with his net and angle earned his bread. Nor pompous cares nor palaces he knew, but wisely from the infectious world withdrew. Poor was his house, his father's painful hand discharged his rent, and ploughed another's land. As flames among the lofty woods are thrown on different sides, and both with winds are blown, the laurels crackle in the sputtering fire, the frighted sylvans from their shades retire. Or, as two neighboring torrents fall from high, rapid they run, the foamy waters fry, they roll to sea with unresisted force, and down the rocks precipitate their course. Not with less rage the rival heroes take their different ways, nor less destruction make. With spears afar, with swords at hand, they strike, and zeal of slaughter fires their souls alike. Like them, their dauntless men maintain the field, and hearts are pierced, unknowing how to yield. They blow for blow return, and wound for wound, and heaps of bodies raise the level ground. Murranus, boasting of his blood that springs from a long royal race of Latian kings, is by the Trojan from his chariot thrown, crushed with the weight of an unwieldy stone. Betwixt the wheels he fell, the wheels that bore his living load, his dying body tore. His starting steeds, to shun the glittering sword, paw down his trampled limbs, forgetful of their lord. Fierce Hyllus threatened high, and face to face affronted Turnus in the middle space. The prince encountered him in full career, and at his temples aimed the deadly spear. So fatally the flying weapon sped, that through his helm it pierced his head. Nor, Cisseus, couldst thou escape from Turnus' hand, in vain the strongest of the Arcadian band. Nor to Cupentus could his gods afford availing aid against the Aenean sword, which to his naked heart pursued the course, nor could his plated shield sustain the force. Iülus fell, whom not the Grecian powers, nor great subverter of the Trojan towers, were doomed to kill, while heaven prolonged his date. But who can pass the bounds prefixed by fate? In high Lyrnessus and in Troy he held 2 palaces, and was from each expelled. Of all the mighty man, the last remains a little spot of foreign earth contains. And now both hosts their broken troops unite in equal ranks, and mix in mortal fight. Serestus and undaunted Menesthius join the Trojan, Tuscan, and Arcadian line. Sea-born Messapus with Atenus heads the Latin squadrons, and to battle leads. They strike, they push, they throng the scanty space, resolved on death, impatient of disgrace. And where one falls, another fills his place. The Cyprian goddess now inspires her son to leave the unfinished fight, and storm the town. For while he rolls his eyes around the plain, in quest of Turnus, whom he seeks in vain, he views the unguarded city from afar, in careless quiet, and secure of war. Occasion offers, and excites his mind to dare beyond the task he first designed. Resolved, he calls his chiefs, they leave the fight. Attended thus, he takes a neighboring height. The crowding troops about their general stand, all under arms, and wait his high command. Then thus the lofty prince: "Hear and obey, ye Trojan bands, without the least delay. Jove is with us, and what I have decreed requires our utmost vigor and our speed. Your instant arms against the town prepare, the source of mischief and the seat of war. This day the Latian towers that mate the sky shall level with the plain in ashes lie. The people shall be slaves, unless in time they kneel for pardon and repent their crime. Twice have our foes been vanquished on the plain. Then shall I wait till Turnus will be slain? Your force against the perjured city bend. There it began, and there the war shall end. The peace profaned our rightful arms requires. Cleanse the polluted place with purging fires." He finished, and one soul inspiring all, formed in a wedge the foot approached the wall. Without the town, an unprovided train of gaping, gazing citizens are slain. Some firebrands, others scaling ladders bear, and those they toss aloft, and these they rear. The flames now launched, the feathered arrows fly, and clouds of missive arms obscure the sky. Advancing to the front, the hero stands, and stretching out to heaven his pious hands, attests the gods, asserts his innocence, upbraids with breach of faith the Ausonian prince, declares the royal honor doubly stained, and twice the rights of holy peace profaned. Dissenting clamors in the town arise, each will be heard, and all at once advise. One part for peace, and one for war contends. Some would exclude their foes, and some admit their friends. The helpless king is hurried in the throng, and whate'er tide prevails is borne along. Thus when the swain within a hollow rock invades the bees with suffocating smoke, they run around or labor on their wings, disused to flight, and shoot their sleepy stings. To shun the bitter fumes in vain they try, black vapors issuing from the vent involve the sky. But fate and envious fortune now prepare to plunge the Latins in the last despair. The queen, who saw the foes invade the town, and brands on tops of burning houses thrown, casts round her eyes, distracted with her fear. No troops of Turnus in the field appear. Once more she stares abroad, but still in vain, and then concludes the royal youth is slain. Mad with her anguish, impotent to bear the mighty grief, she loathes the vital air. She calls herself the cause of all this ill, and owns the dire effects of her ungoverned will. She raves against the gods, she beats her breast, she tears with both her hands her purple vest, then round a beam a running noose she tied, and fastened by the neck, obscenely died. Soon as the fatal news by fame was blown, and to her dames and to her daughter known, the sad Lavinia rends her yellow hair and rosy cheeks, the rest her sorrow share. With shrieks the palace rings, and madness of despair. The spreading rumor fills the public place, confusion, fear, distraction, and disgrace, and silent shame are seen in every face. Latinus tears his garments as he goes, both for his public and his private woes. With filth his venerable beard besmears, and sordid dust deforms his silver hairs, and much he blames the softness of his mind, obnoxious to the charms of womankind, and soon seduced to change what he so well designed, to break the solemn league so long desired, nor finish what his fates, and those of Troy, required. Now Turnus rolls aloof o'er empty plains, and here and there some straggling foes he gleans. His flying coursers please him less and less, ashamed of easy fight and cheap success. Thus half contented, anxious in his mind, the distant cries come driving in the wind. Shouts from the walls, but shouts and murmurs drowned, a jarring mixture and a boding sound. Alas, said he, what mean these dismal cries? What doleful clamors from the town arise? Confused he stops, and backward pulls the reins. She, who the driver's office now sustains, replies, Neglect, my lord, these new alarms. Here fight, and urge the fortune of your arms. There want not others to defend the wall. If by your rival's hand the Italians fall, so shall your fatal sword his friends oppress, in honor equal in success. To this the prince, O sister, for I knew the peace and fringe proceeded first from you. I knew you when you mingled first in fight, and now in vain you would deceive my sight. Why, goddess, this unprofitable care? Who sent you down from heaven involved in air, your share of mortal sorrows to sustain, and see your brother bleeding on the plain? For to what power can Turnus have recourse, or how resist his fate's prevailing force? These eyes beheld Murranus bite the ground. Mighty the man, and mighty was the wound. I heard my dearest friend with dying breath my name invoking to revenge his death. Brave Ufens fell with honor on the place, to shun the shameful sight of my disgrace. On earth supine, a manly corpse he lies, his vest and armor are the victor's prize. Then shall I see Laurentum in a flame which only wanted to complete my shame? How will the Latins hoot their champion's flight? How Dronces will insult and point them to the sight? Is death so hard to bear? Ye gods below, since those above so small compassion show, receive a soul unsullied yet with shame, which not belies my great forefather's name. He said, and while he spoke, with flying speed came Sages, urging on his foamy steed. Fixed on his wounded face a shaft he bore, and seeking Turnus sent his voice before. Turnus, on you alone depends our last relief. Compassionate your friends. Like lightning fierce Aeneas, rolling on, with arms invests, with flames invades the town. The brands are tossed on high, the winds conspire to drive along the deluge of the fire. All eyes are fixed on you. Your foes rejoice, even the king staggers and suspends his choice. Doubts to deliver or defend the town, whom to reject or whom to call his son. The queen, on whom your utmost hopes were placed, herself suborning death, has breathed her last. It is true, Messapus, fearless of his fate, with fierce Aeneas' aid defends the gate. On every side surrounded by the foe, the more they kill, the greater numbers grow. An iron harvest mounts, and still remains to mow. You, far aloof from your forsaken bands, your rolling chariot drive o'er empty sands. Stupid he sate, his eyes on earth declined, and various cares revolving in his mind. Rage, boiling from the bottom of his breast, and sorrow mixed with shame, his soul oppressed. And conscious worth lay laboring in his thought, and love by jealousy to madness wrought. By slow degrees his reason drove away the mists of passion, and resumed her sway. Then, rising on his car, he turned his look, and saw the town involved in fire and smoke. A wooden tower with flames already blazed, which his own hands on beams and rafters raised, and bridges laid above to join the space, and wheels below to roll from place to place. Sister, the fates have vanquished. Let us go the way which heaven and my hard fortune show. The fight is fixed, nor shall the branded name of a base coward blot your brother's fame. Death is my choice, but suffer me to try my force, and vent my rage before I die. He said, and leaping down without delay, through crowds of scattered foes, he freed his way. Striding he passed, impetuous as the wind, and left the grieving goddess far behind. As when a fragment from a mountain torn by raging tempests, or by torrents borne, or sapped by time, or loosened from the roots, prone through the void the rocky ruin shoots, rolling from crag to crag, from steep to steep, down sink at once the shepherds and their sheep. Involved alike, they rush to nether ground, stunned with the shock they fall, and stunned from earth rebound. So Turnus, hasting headlong to the town, shouldering and shoving, bore the squadrons down. Still pressing onward to the walls he drew, where shafts and spears and darts promiscuous flew, and sanguine streams the slippery ground embrue. First stretching out his arm in sign of peace, he cries aloud to make the combat cease. Rutulians, hold! And Latin troops, retire! The fight is mine, and me the gods require. It is just that I should vindicate alone the broken truce, or for the breach atone. This day shall free from wars the Ausonian state, or finish my misfortunes and my fate. Both armies from their bloody work desist, and bearing backward form a spacious list. The Trojan hero, who received from fame the welcome sound, and heard the champion's name, soon leaves the taken works and mounted walls, greedy of war where greater glory calls. He springs to fight, exulting in his force, his jointed armor rattles in the course. Like Eryx or like Athos, great he shows, or Father Apennine, when white with snows his head divine obscure in clouds he hides, and shakes the sounding forest on his sides. The nations, overawed, surcease the fight. Immovable their bodies, fixed their sight. Even death stands still, nor from above they throw their darts, nor drive the battering rams below. In silent order either army stands, and drop their swords, unknowing, from their hands. The Ausonian king beholds with wondering sight two mighty champions matched in single fight, born under climes remote, and brought by fate with swords to try their titles to the state. Now, in closed field, each other from afar they view, and rushing on, begin the war. They launch their spears, then hand to hand they meet. The trembling soil resounds beneath their feet. Their bucklers clash, thick blows descend from high, and flakes of fire from their hard helmets fly. Courage conspires with chance, and both engage with equal fortune yet, and mutual rage. As when two bulls for their fair female fight, in sealess shades, or on Tauburnus height, with horns adverse they meet, the keeper flies, mute stands the herd, the heifers roll their eyes, and wait the event, which victor they shall bear, and who shall be the lord to rule the lusty year. With rage of love the jealous rivals burn, and push for push, and wound for wound return. Their dewlaps gored, their sides are laved in blood. Loud cries and roaring sounds rebellow through the wood. Such was the combat in the listed ground. So clash their swords, and so their shields resound. Jove sets the beam. In either scale he lays the champion's fate, and each exactly weighs. On this side, life and lucky chance ascends. Loaded with death, that other scale descends. Raised on the stretch, young Turnus aims a blow full on the helm of his unguarded foe. Shrill shouts and clamors ring on either side, as hopes and fears their panting hearts divide. But all in pieces flies the traitor's sword, and in the middle stroke deserts his lord. Now is but death or flight. Disarmed, he flies, when in his hand an unknown hilt he spies. Fame says that Turnus, when his steeds he joined, hurrying to war, disordered in his mind, snatched the first weapon which his haste could find. It was not the fated sword his father bore, but that his charioteer Metiscus wore. This, while the Trojans fled, the toughness held. But vain against the great Vulcanian shield, the mortal tempered steel deceived his hand. The shivered fragments shone amid the sand. Surprised with fear, he fled along the field, and now forthright, and now in orbits wheeled. For here the Trojan troops the lists surround, and there the pass is closed with pools and marshy ground. Aeneas hastens, though with heavier pace, his wound, so newly knit, retards the chase, and oft his trembling knees their aid refuse, yet pressing foot by foot, his foe pursues. Thus, when a fearful stag is closed around with crimson toils, or in a river found, high on the bank the deep-mouthed hound appears, still opening, following still, where'er he steers. The persecuted creature to and fro turns here and there to scape his Umbrian foe. Steep is the ascent, and if he gains the land, the purple death is pitched along the strand. His eager foe, determined to the chase, stretched at his length, gains ground at every pace. Now to his beamy head he makes his way, and now he holds, or think he holds, his prey. Just at the pinch the stag springs out with fear. He bites the wind and fills his sounding jaws with air. The rocks, the lakes, the meadows ring with cries. The mortal tumult mounts and thunders in the skies. Thus flies the Daunian prince, and flying, blames his tardy troops, and calling by their names demands his trusty sword. The Trojan threats the realm with ruin, and their ancient seats to lay in ashes, if they dare supply with arms or aid his vanquished enemy. Thus menacing, he still pursues the course with vigor, though diminished of his force. 10 times already round the listed place one chief had fled, and to other given the chase. No trivial prize is played, for on the life or death of Turnus now depends the strife. Within the space an olive tree had stood, a sacred shade, a venerable wood, for vows to Faunus paid, the Latins' guardian god. Here hung the vests, and tablets were engraved of sinking mariners from shipwreck saved. With heedless hands the Trojans felled the tree to make the ground enclosed for combat free. Deep in the root, whether by fate or chance or erring haste, the Trojan drove his lance, then stooped and tugged with force immense to free the encumbered spear from the tenacious tree. That whom his fainting limbs pursued in vain, his flying weapon might from far attain. Confused with fear, bereft of human aid, then Turnus to the gods, and first to Faunus prayed. O Faunus, pity! And thou, Mother Earth, where I thy foster son received my birth, hold fast the steel. If my religious hand your plant has honored, which your foes profaned, propitious hear my pious prayer. He said, nor with successless vows invoked their aid. The incumbent hero wrenched and pulled and strained, but still the stubborn earth the steel detained. Juturna took her time, and while in vain he strove, assumed Meticus' form again, and in that imitated shape restored to the despairing prince his Daunian sword. The queen of love, who with disdain and grief saw the bold nymph afford this prompt relief, to assert her offspring with a greater deed, from the tough root the lingering weapon freed. Once more erect, the rival chiefs advance. One trussed the sword, and one the pointed lance, and both resolved alike to try their fatal chance. Meantime, imperial Jove to Juno spoke, who from a shining cloud beheld the shock. What new arrest, O Queen of Heaven, is sent to stop the fates now laboring in the event? What farther hopes are left thee to pursue? Divine Aeneas, and thou know'st it too, foredoomed to these celestial seats are due. What more attempts for Turnus can be made, that thus thou lingerest in this lonely shade? Is it becoming of the due respect and awful honor of a god elect, a wound unworthy of our state to feel, patient of human hands and earthy steel? Or seems it just the sister should restore a second sword, when one was lost before, and arm a conquered wretch against his conqueror? For what, without the knowledge and avow, nay more, thy dictate, durst Juturna do? At last, in deference to my love, forbear to lodge within thy soul this anxious care. Reclined upon my breast thy grief unload. Who should relieve the goddess but the god? Now all things to their utmost issue tend, pushed by the fates to their appointed end. While leave was given thee in a lawful hour for vengeance, wrath, and unresisted power, tossed on the seas, thou couldst thy foes distress, and driven ashore with hostile arms oppress, deform the royal house, and from the side of the just bridegroom tear the plighted bride. Now cease at my command, the Thunderer said, and with dejected eyes this answer Juno made. Because your dread decree too well I knew, from Turnus and from earth unwilling I withdrew. Else should you not behold me here alone, involved in empty clouds, my friends bemoan, but girt with vengeful flames in open sight, engaged against my foes in mortal fight. It is true, Juturna mingled in the strife by my command to save her brother's life, at least to try. But by the Stygian lake, the most religious oath the gods can make, with this restriction, not to bend the bow, or toss the spear, or trembling dart to throw. And now, resigned to your superior might, and tired with fruitless toils, I loathe the fight. This let me beg, and this no fates withstand, both for myself and for your father's land, that, when the nuptial bed shall bind the peace which I, since you ordain, consent to bless, the laws of either nation be the same, but let the Latins still retain their name, speak the same language which they spoke before, wear the same habits which their grandsires wore. Call them not Trojans, perish the renown and name of Troy with that detested town. Latium be Latium still, Let Alba reign, and Rome's immortal majesty remain. Then thus the founder of mankind replies. Unruffled was his front, serene his eyes. Can Saturn's issue and heaven's other heir such endless anger in her bosom bear? Be mistress, and your full desires obtain, but quench the choler you foment in vain. From ancient blood the Ausonian people sprung, shall keep their name, their habit, and their tongue. The Trojans to their custom shall be tied. I will myself their common rights provide. The natives shall command, the foreigners subside. All shall be Latium, Troy without a name, and her lost sons forget from whence they came. From blood so mixed a pious race shall flow, equal to gods, excelling all below. No nation more respect to you shall pay, or greater offerings on your altars lay. Juno consents, well pleased that her desires had found success, and from the cloud retires. The peace thus made, the Thunderer next prepares to force the watery goddess from the wars. Deep in the dismal regions, void of light, 3 daughters at a birth were born to night. These their brown mother, brooding on her care, endued with windy wings to flit in air, with serpents girt alike, and crowned with hissing hair. In heaven the Deri called, and still at hand, before the throne of angry Jove they stand, his ministers of wrath, and ready still the minds of mortal men with fears to fill, whene'er the moody sire to wreak his hate on realms or towns deserving of their fate, hurls down diseases, death, and deadly care, and terrifies the guilty worlds with war. One sister plague of these with heaven he sent, to fright Juturna with a dire portent. The pest comes whirling down, by far more slow springs the swift arrow from the Parthian bow, or Sidon yew, when traversing the skies and drenched in poisonous juice, the sure destruction flies. With such a sudden and unseen a flight shot through the clouds the daughter of the night. Soon as the field enclosed she had in view, and from afar her destined quarry knew, contracted to the boding bird she turns, which haunts the ruined piles and hallowed urns, and beats about the tombs with nightly wings, where songs obscene on sepulchres she sings. Thus lessened in her form, with frightful cries the fury round unhappy Turnus flies, flaps on his shield and flutters o'er his eyes. A lazy chillness crept along his blood, choked was his voice, his hair with horror stood. Juturna from afar beheld her fly, and knew the ill omen by her screaming cry and stridor of her wings. Amazed with fear, her beauteous breast she beat, and rent her flowing hair. Ah me, she cries, in this unequal strife, what can thy sister more to save thy life? Weak as I am, can I, alas, contend in arms with that inexorable fiend? Now, I quit the field. Forbear to fright my tender soul, ye baleful birds of night. The lashing of your wings I know too well, the sounding flight and funeral screams of hell. These are the gifts you bring from haughty Jove, the worthy recompense of ravished love. Did he for this exempt my life from fate? O hard conditions of a mortal state, though born to death, not privileged to die, but forced to bear imposed eternity. Take back your envious bribes, and let me go companion to my brother's ghost below. The joys are vanished. Nothing now remains of life immortal but immortal pains. What earth will open her devouring womb to rest a weary goddess in the tomb? She drew a length of sighs. No more she said, but in her azure mantle wrapped her head, then plunged into her stream with deep despair, and her last sobs came bubbling up in air. Now stern Aeneas his weighty spear against his foe, and thus upbraids his fear. What farther subterfuge can Turnus find? What empty hopes are harbored in his mind? It is not thy swiftness can secure thy flight, not with their feet but hands the valiant fight. Vary thy shape in thousand forms, and dare what skill and courage can attempt in war. Wish for the wings of winds, to mount the sky, or hid within the hollow earth to lie?" The champion shook his head, and made this short reply: "No threats of thine my manly mind can move. It is hostile heaven I dread, and partial Jove." He said no more, but with a sigh repressed the mighty sorrow in his swelling breast. Then, as he rolled his troubled eyes around, an antique stone he saw, the common bound of neighboring fields, and barrier of the ground, so vast that 12 strong men of modern days the enormous weight from earth could hardly raise. He heaved it at a lift, and poised on high ran staggering on against his enemy, but so disordered that he scarcely knew his way or what unwieldy weight he threw. His knocking knees are bent beneath the load, and shivering cold congeals his vital blood. The stone drops from his arms, and falling short for want of vigor, mocks his vain effort. And as, when heavy sleep has closed the sight, the sickly fancy labors in the night, we seem to run, and destitute of force, our sinking limbs forsake us in the course. In vain we heave for breath, in vain we cry, the nerves, unbraced, their usual strength deny, and on the tongue the faltering accents die. So Turnus fared. Whatever means he tried, all force of arms and points of art employed, the fury flew athwart, and made the endeavor void. 1,000 various thoughts his soul confound. He stared about, nor aid nor issue found. His own men stop the pass, and his own walls surround. Once more he pauses, and looks out again, and seeks the goddess charioteer in vain. Trembling he views the thundering chief advance, and brandishing aloft the deadly lance. Amazed he cowers beneath his conquering foe, forgets to ward, and waits the coming blow. Astonished while he stands, and fixed with fear, aimed at his shield he sees the impending spear. The hero measured first, with narrow view, the destined mark, and rising as he threw, with its full swing the fatal weapon flew. Not with less rage the rattling thunder falls, or stones from battering engines break the walls. Swift as a whirlwind, from an arm so strong, the lance drove on, and bore the death along. Naught could his sevenfold shield the prince avail, nor aught beneath the arms the coat of mail. It pierced through all, and with a grisly wound transfixed his thigh, and doubled him to ground. With groans the Latins rend the vaulted sky, woods, hills, and valleys to the voice reply. Now low on earth the lofty chief is laid, with eyes cast upward, and with arms displayed, and recreant thus to the proud victor prayed: "I know my death deserved, no hope to live. Use what the gods and thy good fortune give. Yet think, oh think, if mercy may be shown, thou hadst a father once, and hast a son. Pity my sire, now sinking to the grave, and for Anchises' sake old Daunus save. Or if thy vowed revenge pursue my death, give to my friends my body void of breath. The Latian chiefs have seen me beg my life. Thine is the conquest, thine the royal wife. Against the yielded man it is mean ignoble strife." In deep suspense the Trojans seemed to stand, and just prepared to strike, repressed his hand. He rolled his eyes, and every moment felt his manly soul with more compassion melt. When, casting down a casual glance, he spied the golden belt that glittered on his side, the fatal spoils which haughty Turnus tore from dying Pallas, and in triumph wore. Then, roused anew to wrath, he loudly cries, flames while he spoke came flashing from his eyes: "Traitor, dost thou to grace pretend, clad as thou art in trophies of my friend? To his sad soul a grateful offering go. It is Pallas. Pallas gives this deadly blow." He raised his arm aloft, and at the word Deep in his bosom drove the shining sword. The streaming blood disdained his arms around, and the disdainful soul came rushing through the wound. This has been the Aeneid by Virgil, translated by John Dryden.